All right, hello everyone. Welcome to my channel. I'm Thomas and I do educational videos on all kinds of different subjects, mostly the esoteric and obscure, but things that I think are very important and that would help people a lot if they knew about them. Things that have really helped me in my life. And so today we are doing our 80-second video on the reciprocal system of theory. This is a theory of everything. It was derived by Dewey B. Larson back in the 20th century. He died back in 1990. We're looking at his final book that came out after he died in 1995. But way before that, he did a lot of other stuff as well. He kind of stumbled across the makings of the theory as early as 1930 and finally came out with his fundamental postulates in the 50s. The gist of the first and most major postulate is that in Larson's universe, the universe is not made out of matter. It's not made out of energy, but it is made out of motion. Now he called it at one time he called it space-time, and then in a later period he called it change in 3 dimensions. But in this original, in this particular iteration, or in the the long-lasting iteration, he said the universe is made out of motion. Motion is the relationship between space and time. Space and time are 3-dimensional. I would say 3 or 4-dimensional. And you can think of that as a cube. If you have a cube, you have X, Y, Z coordinates. But if you take the cube and you draw an X on each face of the cube, like from diagonally across each face, each one of the 6 faces, then you have tetrahedral coordinates, which are 4-dimensional. So you really have 3 or 4. You can think of it more linearly as just 1, 2, 3, and 0. So 0, 1, 2, 3, that's 4 numbers, but it's really only 3 because the 0 doesn't count, but it does count. So you have 3 or 4 dimensions. And the space and time are both quantized, meaning that they have a minimum unit. There's a minimum unit of space and a minimum unit of time. The minimum unit of space is on the order of 4.56 times 10 to the minus 8 meters. So, 1/20 millionth of a meter. And so it's very, very small, but compared to like atoms, it's very large. And then the minimum unit of time is very, very small. 1.52 times 10 to the minus 16 seconds. So in every second you have almost 6.6 quadrillion units of time per second. A quadrillion is the one that's beyond the trillion. So 1,000 trillions, 6,600 trillion seconds per, or units of time per second. But if you have 1 unit of space in 1 unit of time, you have the speed of light. The speed of light is, in Larson's system, not the maximum speed of the universe as it is in Einstein's system, but it is the midpoint of the universe, or the neutral point. So this is a boundary, the speed of light. Above this boundary, you have everything that's moving faster than the speed of light. And that is pretty much unknown to science, or only speculated upon. And Larson calls that sector 2, or the cosmic sector. And then over here is the familiar universe, the part that's moving slower than the speed of light. Larson calls that the material sector, or sector 1. Now, Sector 1 grows by aggregation, bonding of atoms and molecules till it gets to its most complex level, which is DNA. And at the level of DNA, the body becomes eligible to be taken over by a unit from Sector 2, which is what Larson calls control. So it's controlled by a Sector 2 element. And Sector 1 and Sector 2 combined is what Larson calls the life unit. So life is a combination of material and cosmic sectors. And then the life unit grows and aggregates from the one-celled organism all the way up to its more complex form, which Larson says is the intelligent human being. And the intelligent human being at that point becomes eligible to be controlled overall by a component from Sector 3. And Sector 3 is really the part of the universe that is independent of space and time, or beyond space and time. And so other people have called that God, or gods, or the religious, or the spiritual world. And so there's competing controls. The human being is controlled by the life unit, which is geared towards survival, and the human being is also eligible to be controlled by the Sector 3 unit, which is geared toward ethical behavior or good behavior. And sometimes those things conflict, and that's where free will comes in. These Sector 3 units communicate with humans through channels such as ESP, intuition, religious revelation, and scientific insight. And those messages that we get through those channels are always correct. But our ability to translate them correctly is a different matter. So if we're very prepared, then we have the better chance to be able to understand those messages. So it comes down to our level of preparation. Okay, now in this book, we are in chapter 20 of Larson's book, Beyond Space and Time, his final book, which is his delving into metaphysics, Sector 3 phenomena in general. Beyond Space and Time is the name of the book. And chapter 20 is called The Moral Objective. And he just got done talking about he's in the middle of talking about the ethical code, that our intuitions and our religious revelations, they all give us kind of like pieces of the tapestry of the overall ethical code for human beings. And so we'll just take over right there. But the development of the reciprocal system has demonstrated that the intricate design of the universe is not a matter of infinite skill and wisdom in fitting a multitude of parts together in the manner of things made by an intelligent mind for a purpose. The physical structure of the universe in all of its complexity is merely a consequence of some very simple properties of the space and time of which the universe is composed. And the enormous number and variety of parts fit together smoothly, not because of skillful construction, but because they are all derived from space and time. And the relation of these two basic entities, motion, by addition or combination. This means that the argument from design is no longer tenable in its original form. Its claim to validity might still be argued on the basis of a contention that construction of a system wherein all of the complicated and intricate details that make up the universe are necessary consequences of a few basic properties of a single component, motion, is an even greater feat than the construction of this kind of a system out of a multitude of parts. But in this case, the force of the analogy is lost, as there is no man-made system that can be considered analogous to the system that constitutes the physical universe. In any event, it is now clear that if the physical universe was created by a deity or by any other metaphysical agency, what was created was the fundamental entity, a particular kind of motion. That is, motion governed by a specific set of laws and principles. All else in this physical universe is implicitly contained in the fundamental entity and follows from it. The situation with respect to the moral code is similar. What exists is a general set of rules. It has been established in the preceding discussion that members of the human race are potentially subject to full or partial direction by control units from Sector 3, the sector of the universe independent of space and time, and that Sector 3 is governed by a self-consistent set of laws and principles analogous to, but different from, the laws and principles which govern Sector 2, the biological sector. The appropriate portions of the Sector 3 governing rules are the moral code. And to the extent that an individual is under Sector 3 control, that is, to the extent that he acts as an ethical man rather than as a mere biological organism, he will comply with this code as a matter of course, just as material bodies act in accordance with the physical laws that govern their sector. Ethical man follows the moral code simply because this is the way that ethical men act. There are some who object to any link between morality and metaphysical existence on the ground that all human goodness comes from a supernatural source. That amounts to believing that it is unusual and difficult, if not impossible, to be good of our own accord. That's quoting Loring. Back to Larson. The flaw is this viewpoint is that it confuses metaphysical with supernatural. It is impossible for a human being as a part of the physical universe in his capacity as a biological organism to be good. The closest he can come to it is to be ethically neutral under circumstances where no moral issue is involved. He can be good only in his capacity as a local manifestation of metaphysical existence, just as he can be alive only in his capacity as a local manifestation of Sector 2. That is, as an organism under Sector 2 control. Thus, even though one is good of his own accord, as he must be if he is good at all, since there is no other way in which it can be accomplished, it is nevertheless true that all human goodness comes from a metaphysical, but not supernatural, source, the metaphysical aspect of one's own existence. Identification of the moral code as a set of laws analogous to the laws of the physical sciences, laws which specify how the entities to which they apply will behave under specified circumstances, rather than how they ought to behave, complies with the demand of the empiricist that ethical theory have a purely factual basis. On this new basis, ethical judgments do have objective validity. They are not merely advice of doubtful reliability. Whether or not a particular item of moral significance is good, and hence belongs in the moral code, reduces to the factual question as to whether this item is consistent with the laws and principles of Sector 3. A question which is capable of being answered by the methods described in the previous chapters. This disposes of the empiricist's complaint that the customary use of the word good is misleading, inasmuch as the user contrives to smuggle a normative judgment into what purports to be a statement of fact. Our use of the good designation merely identifies the item as part of the moral code. The necessary command or directive is supplied independently. The clarification of the general nature of the code does not, in itself, provide the directive that we need. It merely brings us back to the original question in somewhat different terms. But it does throw some important new light on the subject. We no longer have to ask why, insofar as we wish to act as ethical men rather than as animals. We should follow the moral code, since we have determined that our choice between these two alternatives automatically fixes our course. We are, however, left with another question. Why should we choose the status of ethical men rather than the status of animals? The immediate emotional response to this question is likely to be that the answer is obvious. But this is mainly an indignant reaction to the idea of being classed with animals. It is by no means self-evident why we should choose to be controlled by one aspect of our nature rather than another. We can, however, resolve the issue by consideration of the purpose of human existence. It is true that there is a school of thought which contends that there is no such purpose, or indeed any meaning at all in human life. But our findings with respect to existence outside the space-time universe now make this hypothesis wholly untenable. As long as the physical universe with which we are in direct contact is considered to represent the whole of existence, and the inhabitants thereof are regarded as mere cogs in a mighty but aimless machine, absence of purpose is a plausible hypothesis. The discovery that the space-time universe is only a part, perhaps only a very small part, of a greater whole, and the human beings are subject to direction by metaphysical agencies cuts the ground out from under any such idea, and implies that there is an underlying purpose of some kind. The existence of such a purpose can be verified by the same kind of tests that we apply to other information from intuitive sources. The overwhelming majority of human individuals, scientists and non-scientists alike, have always refused to accept the contention that the universe is purposeless, notwithstanding the lack of evidence to support their intuitive position. On the basis of the criteria we have established for judging the validity of intuitive information, this almost universal agreement as to the existence of a purpose is, in itself, practically conclusive proof that this is a valid item of intuitive knowledge. The situation here is essentially the same as that which is encountered in the fundamentals of physical science, where there is almost unanimous agreement based wholly on intuition that the physical universe is rational. Identification of the purpose of existence will be deferred until after some additional background information is developed, but the results of that extension of the study can be anticipated to the extent of stating what is practically self-evident as soon as the existence of a purpose is ascertained. That is, advancement of the human race, or some of the members thereof, from the status of biological organisms to the status of ethical men, is essential to the accomplishment of this purpose. This, then, is the moral objective. And here is the origin of the moral imperative. Man ought to contribute toward fulfillment of the purpose for which he exists. In order to do so, he must cease to be merely an animal and must become an ethical man. Otherwise, his existence is wasted. This also gives us the answer to the question with which we concluded the last chapter. An ethical man complies with all of the provisions of the ethical code. Anything short of full compliance indicates that the transition from animal to ethical man is not yet complete. If an individual's religion conflicts with any of these provisions, that religion is wrong in these particular respects, and an ethical man will not permit his religion to influence him to violate the moral code. It should be noted in this connection that while full compliance with the code is necessary in order to attain the status of ethical man, whether this is sufficient for the purpose is another question. Bringing the human race into full compliance with the moral code is not a simple or easy undertaking. At the outset, man is in much the same position as the primitive single-celled organism. A long period of growth and development lies ahead in both cases before advanced type of animals or full-fledged ethical men can appear on the scene. There is, however, one significant difference. The biological organism must wait for natural processes to operate, but man can facilitate progress by his own efforts. One of the most important directions that these efforts can take is the acquisition and dissemination of ethical knowledge. It is not enough to have the desire to do right. One must also know what is right. That is, he must know the code of Sector 3. As in the physical field, where scientists keep up a relentless search for the correct formulation of the laws that govern physical processes, those who bear the primary responsibility for the advancement of ethical knowledge, the philosophers and theologians particularly, should be applying their own best efforts to discover the correct expression of the moral code. Our finding that such information can be obtained by direct communication from Sector 3 through the process that we call by the various names as intuition, revelation, or insight now clears the way for a systematic approach to this problem analogous to the procedures of science. Okay, we're going to stop right there. Thanks for tuning in. We'll resume with Chapter 20 tomorrow and discuss a little bit. Have a great day. Hope to see you soon.